Good evening. On behalf of Veterans in Politics International, I want to thank you both for coming in this evening for this endorsement interview. I just want to start off, before I get into the rules of it, I just want to make the statement. This great nation is one that was founded and based on common law, and those that are responsible to make sure that those laws are followed in accordance with our Constitution are judges. And we here at Veterans in Politics International take that responsibility very seriously. So just to give you guys, both of you, a brief overview of this process and how it works. The panel members will give a 30-second introduction of ourselves. And then each one of you will be given a minute and a half to introduce yourself, what office you're running for, and why you're asking for our endorsement. Please keep in mind, this is not a debate, it's an interview, so neither one of you can ask each other questions. Panel members will ask you questions, and please respond back to the panel member only. Once a panel member asks you a question, you'll be given 2 minutes to answer our question. I won't be rude and stop you mid-sentence. You know, if you're at 2 minutes but you still haven't finished, I'll let you continue, but please be respectful of your opponent. At the end of the question and answer portion, each candidate will be given a minute and a half to close and make a closing statement and give contact information for the voters. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jim Jonas. I'm the director of Veterans in Politics. I've been involved with this organization since 2008. And I believe it's a great organization, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. I think this endorsement process is the fairest endorsement process of any organization in the state of Nevada.
My name is Stephanie Phillips. I have lived here almost 30 years, and I've been in the real estate business that whole time. I'm a real estate broker, have my own brokerage. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. They're 20 and 17, and I'm happy to be here.
My name is Vem Miller. I'm a documentary filmmaker, investigative journalist, and I do a lot of different podcasts and a lot of work investigating different forms of corruption.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with our minute and a half introduction. Ladies first. Judge Gall, if you'd like to go, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Maria Gall. I'm your currently sitting judge in District Court Department 9, and that is the seat that I am seeking to retain. I was appointed after a judicial selection process, a vetting process, in other words, by our governor at the end of June. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the daughter of a Korean immigrant who was a hotel housekeeper and a cashier checker. I'm also the daughter of a U.S. Army veteran. He was a tanker for a number of years, retired after 20 years, then went to work for the Department of Corrections for a short time, and then went to work for a defense contractor. I'm also the stepdaughter of a U.S. Army veteran who taught at the armor school. And then after he retired, he worked at a butcher as the commissary for a long time. Those are the people that I learned my value of hard work from. And it's because of them and because of the sacrifices that they made, both for me and for this country, that I was able to go to college, and then I was able to go to law school. The reason that I'm looking for your endorsement is twofold. One, because of my affiliation with the military as a military child, as the stepsister of somebody who was in the military, having the backing of veterans is incredibly important to me, because I know what veterans stand for. I know the sacrifices they made. So it would be an incredible honor to me to know that Veterans in Politics and the people you represent were backing me. Second, I like what you all stand for. You stand for openness and transparency in our government, and most importantly, in our court system. Our court system is founded on, or should be founded on, open transparency. And it is because of groups like Veterans in Politics that we hold our judges and we hold our court system accountable. And that's something I would be very honored to be endorsed by. Thank you.
Mr. Leavitt.
Appreciate it. And for the record, very pleased to meet my fellow candidate. I don't like to use the word opponent because we have judicial canons. and they're supposed to mean something, and they're supposed to stand for ethics. And unfortunately, I'm going to tell a little story tonight about something that happened with my campaign this week. And the Nevada Judicial Discipline Commission will investigate. I'm not casting any aspersion on Judge Gall. I want to be 100% clear. Early this week, I was contacted by a well-known consultant here in Las Vegas. This is all spelled out in our Judicial Discipline Commission filing, which will go public tomorrow. And I was told that if I didn't withdraw from this race, that a negative campaign ad that was defamatory, that was run against me 4 years ago, that I could expect to see it again. I want to make clear, I don't believe that Judge Gall has any knowledge of this, but the Judicial Discipline Commission has subpoena power, and they will conduct their investigation. It will probably be after the November election, but I don't take threats kindly, especially when you're running for a distinguished office. So I'll start off by introducing myself, James Dean Leavitt. It's been a privilege. Ms. Phillips, I've been here 30 years, exactly, very close to your time. I started my private practice with Gallett's Earl, Catalano and Smith. It was the #1 rated personal injury firm. At that time, it was an absolute privilege to learn from those giants. I then passed the bar examination, had an opportunity to be an associate attorney with Goodman and Chesnoff, the preeminent criminal defense firm in Las Vegas. Some may debate that. Extraordinary opportunity that I had. I opened my private practice in 1994. 10 years later, after earning a living for my family, I filed for the Board of Regents. My general election opponent was Gloria Sturman, remarkable lady. We had a very civil, ethical, engaging campaign. Best thing that ever happened to her was she lost that race because she subsequently ran for district court judge and was elected. And I was stuck in a non-paying job for 12 years. But the most glorious unpaid jobs. Real quickly.
Yeah, you need to wrap it up because you wasted like a minute of our time already.
Veterans mean a lot to me. Let me tell you why they matter. We are all immigrants. The difference is my first immigrant was John Deacon Leavitt. That was in the 1600s. My mother is a member of the Daughters of America's Revolution. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the intro.
All right, thank you. Who wants to start with the first question?
I'd like to know what that commercial is about.
Well, you know what? You can call. When you get a copy of the complaint, you can look that up. And if you want to give attention to something that was defamatory, then you're welcome to do so.
All right. So that was an interesting introduction, but thank you both very much. So I want to start with my first question. When it comes to electing judges, I know it's state law. Okay, but there's been a lot of criticism back and forth over the years about whether we should or should not elect judges. Now, me personally, I just want to know an opinion, not whether you think they should be elected or not. It's more to the point of, do you honestly believe that the voting public, myself included, has a sufficient enough understanding and background in order to properly vet judicial candidates as far as the knowledge of the actual law? Judge Gall.
Thank you for that question. I think you've raised a very important issue, and an issue that our electorate struggles with. And there's so many, we could spend an entire hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on this issue alone. I know from my own experience, when we are in what I'll call a term year. So for instance, in 2020, you have 32 departments up for election just in district court. We're not talking about justice court. We're not talking about municipal court. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, right? It's a down ballot race By the time you get all the way down the ballot, you've already gone through, the governor, the state senator, representatives, and it's a challenge. And so I think it would be intellectually dishonest for me to say the entire electorate has the information they need to make a meaningful, informed decision. But that is part of our job. If we are going to have a system where we elect our judicial officials, we need to be out there educating the electorate on the different court systems, on our qualifications, and what our court systems mean for them.
Mr. Leavitt?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Just so I understand the procedure, am I going to be first half the time and she's going to be second?
It just all matters on who originally the question is directed to.
Okay, I'd like you to alternate that.
Okay, well, I'll
just a suggestion.
No, okay,
I'm your guest. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be your
exactly.
guest. So I'll answer the question. I feel very strongly about this issue. Let me tell you why. I was an elected member of the Board of Regents for 12 years, 2004, 2010, 2016. During that time, there have been a variety of bills proposed to take the regents out of the Constitution, also to make them appointed. We've also seen that with the judges. We've had 2 or 3 different bills since the 30 years that I've been practiced. We'll often hear complaints about the Board of Regents, and then we will hear calls from some progressives. We need to change the system. We need to rely on the governor. We had a governor, think about this, 3 weeks ago that appointed someone to this seat to give an obvious advantage 3 months before the election. Nothing to do with Judge Gall. Shameless. Okay. And I can say shameless because I believe it's shameless. And I'm a personal friend of the governor's. I served 4 years with him on the Board of Regents. It was pure political pandering. But when we have a problem at the city council, if we have people having fights and biting fingers, we don't see calls to appoint the city council. Several years ago, we had 6 out of the 7 members of the Clark County Commission indicted. We don't see calls. We just had a president that some say was a little bit unpopular. We don't have calls to appoint the president. So I'm going to say I couldn't disagree with your proposal more. I like it, but I'm just being intellectually honest. The solution is for the public to educate themselves, because if you don't do that, if it's the Board of Regents, then let's do judges. Then let's do the assembly, okay? If we want to discuss appointing people, let's look at every single office, and I'm okay with that. But let's not pick out certain offices. The solution, I trust the people far more than I trust any governor to make an appointment and to make a wise, measured decision. That's the history of this country.
Okay, thank you very much.
So how do we make it easier for people to make an educated choice as far as their selection for a judge? Right now, I was actually running a campaign myself for an assembly district, and one of the biggest complaints I'd hear is that after a certain point in that ballot, there's just not a lot of information out there. So it's like a lot of people don't feel comfortable voting. Some people just say, oh, this person name sounds nice, and check, but that's not the right way to make a choice. How do we make it easier for them to know who to vote for?
Happy to answer, and thank you. I guess we're rotating. I didn't want to interrupt. The Bar Association, do they sponsor debates between judicial candidates? Absolutely not. Why not? Where we pay dues, shouldn't we as lawyers be educating the public? I will meet every single night anywhere to discuss these issues with my opponent. That's the way it should be. Everything should be public. But because it's tough to raise money for these races, and I know, okay, I set a record in 2018. I raised $330,000, spent $50,000 of my own money, and I could barely get a message out countywide. Barely, because the county is so large. It's a huge problem. But where's the responsibility? Ultimately, it's with the people, but secondarily, it's with the Bar Association. They should be sponsoring events like this every single night.
So I know, Judge Gall, you're going to answer that same question, but just following up on that. So you're suggesting that the Bar Association should set up debates.
Absolutely.
And why aren't
Not just the Bar Association, but they're the ones that primarily, let's face it, lawyers appear in justice and district court.
Why aren't they not doing that, though?
I can't speak for the Bar Association. I've asked it. I've requested the faculty senate at UNLV to have debates with the regents. You answer the question. Great question.
Judge Gall.
Thank you very much. So I think, again, you've touched upon a very important issue, but I think the issue begins before you get to the elected official, before you even get to judicial elections, because we've got to talk about understanding the courts. And there does need to be an education system, not just about our courts and how our courts operate, but the importance of the courts and how they can impact our function of government. Now, what I have been happy to see is in the last, let's say, decade and a half, I think because of the interest in our Supreme Court, people have become a bit more attuned to the impact that our court system has on our government function. But I think we have a long way to go. And while Mr. Leavitt makes a good point about the Bar Association, it's going to take more than just the Bar Association. It's going to take I think it has to begin when we start learning about civics in school. We often learn about the executive. We often learn about the legislature. And from my recollection, when I was going to school, is that the judicial gets a pretty short shrift. And so it's got to begin early where we start talking about the civic impact and the governmental impact that our courts have. And that's where I think you can start getting individuals engaged into what our court system means. And once they become engaged, they can go out there, listen to the candidates. The candidates should be putting our information out there, for instance, on websites and elsewhere, going to talk to groups like your group, and educating the electorate. And so the problem that Mr. Miller, that you raise is a real problem, but I think it begins much earlier, and it's a much more fundamental problem than we realize.
I want to know, what is the threshold of when you're in court and you see the counsel on both sides, and one of them happens to be your friend or your neighbor, or you're related, or you used to date them. Whatever the relationship is, there's a personal relationship. For a realtor, if we're related to the client, we have to disclose that. And that's the only requirement. Otherwise, obviously we don't. With you guys, with judges, what is that threshold? When do you have to disclose? What do you have to disclose? And then when would you recuse yourself? What is that level of, where does that have to be met? Or is that you have to recuse yourself in what situation?
No.
Thank you.
Fair. Your turn first.
All right. So thanks so much, Ms. Phillips, for asking that question. There's actually a rule that governs this. It's Rule 2.11 of the Nevada Rules of Judicial Conduct, and it talks about disqualification. And it addresses actually many of the points that you raised with relationships, meaning what I'll call as familial relationships. It's within the third degree. And there are different, I guess, situations where you have to recuse versus where you have to disclose, because that's a distinction. So let me give you some examples. I'm going to call my husband. My husband is an attorney in town. Okay? He can obviously never appear before me. And so he is on my automatic disqualification list. Okay? But you also asked about friends. Now comes, well, what type of friend are they, right? Is this my best bosom buddy from growing up? Probably not only have to disclose, I would have to recuse. But let's talk about it. We're a very close bar. It's somebody that I know. It's not somebody I socialize with, but it's somebody that I know, right? Maybe I've had lunch with them with a group of other people in the past. Then I have to balance that against another rule, which is called the duty to sit, okay? Which is, unless there's a basis for recusal and disqualification, you have to sit. right? But in that instance, you still have a duty to disclose, where you have to disclose your relationship to both sides in a fair opportunity so that if they either want to, for instance, if the situation is appropriate, preempt you, because you can preempt our judges. You can preempt, for instance, the first choice that you might get, or if they want to make their own motion to disqualify. And so you have to give them that information. Even if you don't think it's a basis for disqualification, you have to give them that information so that they can discuss it amongst themselves and with their clients out of the presence of the court, and then they can make a meaningful decision.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This comes up especially when we're talking about donors. That's where it matters the most. One thing that I have pledged is to have, if I am elected to this position, to, on my judicial website, to have a list of every single donor. They don't have to go to look at the Nevada Secretary of State and look at C&E reports. They can go to District Court Department 9, and there's going to be a prominent tab that says donors, so that people know that if they think there's any reason that I may be biased or subject to influence because of a monetary contribution, as Judge Gall points out, there are civil peremptory challenges that you can make. What she doesn't talk about is you can't do that in criminal cases. Then it's strictly what is the basis for withdrawal. And there's not just Nevada Supreme Court rules. There are Nevada revised statutes that talk about ethics. All of the Ethics Commission statutes apply to public officials, including judges. So you have to be upfront. There's no great solution for the problem other than transparency.
So what if a litigant finds out after the fact that the judge had a relationship with one of the attorneys, the opposing counsel, and they have an office together or they're in business together, and that was not disclosed? What happens to that judge?
Is that a follow-up to me, or is that directed to
both of
Judge
you?
Gall?
Who polices the judges in that case, and what happens to them, or what should happen to them?
It's really the private litigants that do it, and it's the attorneys that are involved with the case. Similar to a jury verdict, you find out a week later, maybe the member of the jury was communicating with someone on the outside, reading the newspaper, for example. There are different mechanisms and legal challenges that can be filed at that point. But in terms of discipline, you've got the Nevada Judicial Discipline Commission, you have recall, and you have voters 6 years from now saying, we're not happy with you. Those are the only three remedies that exist.
So using your example, Ms. Phillips, in that instance, if the other attorney discovered that the judge had a relationship with their opponent, the opposing counsel, they would likely need to make a complaint to the Judicial Ethics Commission, because that is the body that oversees, they and the Supreme Court are the body that oversees our judges. And then there would likely be a fight over the validity of the decisions that were rendered in that case. And depending on what the exact relationship was, because you gave kind of varying examples, that opinion very well may be reversed and the case would have to begin again.
Are there fundamental issues with the system that if you had the power, you would alter, change? And if so, what are those fundamental issues?
For me, the fundamental issue, when you talk about the system, that's very broad. For me, it's that we have too many litigants, the underserved, who aren't represented by counsel, who can't afford counsel. We have legal aid, but they have a monetary threshold, an income threshold. Typically, I think it's around $25,000. And they can't even serve everybody that makes under that amount, that has an annual income under that amount. And then when you think about it, people over that amount don't even qualify for legal aid. And if you make $26,000, $27,000, $30,000, even $50,000, depending on your situation, you may not be able to afford an attorney. And so to me, at least in the civil world, it works differently in the criminal world, right? Because if you're a defendant, you're entitled to defense. But in the civil world, you are there's a big problem not being able to afford counsel.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the question. You know, one of the interesting things, nearly 1,000 years ago, with English common law, there were laws of court and there were laws of equity. We ended up getting rid of the courts of equity because we formalized judicial proceedings. We made it tougher to be a lawyer. We made it tougher to be a pro se litigant. But what's interesting, under Nevada law, judges have the ability to relax the rules of evidence when you have a pro se defendant in your courtroom. And when that happens, in my courtroom, they will get every benefit of the doubt. I may have to explain things to them as the judge. I may have to ask them to repeat the question because they're not represented by counsel. I don't have to strictly follow the rules of evidence. I can show compassion. I can show what I'm going to call equity. And that's one thing that we can do.
So I want to talk about qualified immunity. What do you think about it? Should judges have it or not? And when they violate somebody's constitutional rights, should they be automatically thrown off the bench?
Well, great question. Nothing should happen automatic in this country. There should be some hearings. In Alice in Wonderland, you know, they had the verdict first and then they had the trial second. We don't do it this way in this country. Anytime that you are about to take away a valuable due process right, and a due process right gets existed when there's a contract, and there's a contract between you and the electorate. That's why it's so difficult to remove judges outside of recall. Whether that's a good rule or not, you know, that's a broader sort of implication. But judges, we have a Judicial Discipline Commission. Okay, we've seen judges removed, and we've seen a few removed. They do exercise their powers. Do they move as quick as they could? Some say no, but we don't fund them in the way that perhaps they should be funded so that they can address these issues. But I think judicial complaints should have the highest priority. They should be expedited because it affects and it undermines the confidence in the court system. And if we lose confidence in the court system and we no longer have faith in the rule of law, that's the end of democracy.
Well, you guys kind of police your own selves. So should there be an outside committee or citizen committee board that kind of weighs in on that when there's something just egregious that happens, which it happens here? You know, there's judges that abuse litigants and their rights and all of that. We all know that happens. There's corruption in the courts. So should there be an outside group that, you know, judges shouldn't just get an automatic, oh, I'm just immune. I can do whatever I want to.
Yeah. So I've heard of a group called Veterans in Politics International. That does a lot of the safeguarding, particularly in family court. I am all for that. There was a recent decision by Judge Bell limiting access to observing what goes on in family court. You can come to pajamas in my courtroom. You can bring school kids. You can bring anybody. Everything I do or say should be public record, and it should be subject to the strictest and quickest scrutiny, and I support that 100%.
Thank you very much. I support qualified immunity for most instances, but I think the example that you didn't use a specific example, but I think you're referring to really substantial violations of constitutional rights. Like, for instance, a judge, and this happened out east, a judge who was basically in bed with private prison systems, and he was getting paid to throw juveniles into, private juvenile centers. Okay. That's a problem. That's a real problem. And you've got to hold judges who are part of a corrupt system accountable. And that judge would not even qualify for in my opinion, that judge should not even qualify for qualified immunity, no pun intended. there has to be oversight. And I think we do need to look at our system in Nevada, because I am someone who thinks we should constantly be educating ourselves, and we should constantly be looking at our systems and ways to improve our systems. And we should look at the judicial oversight system that we have here to make sure that the system itself is rigorous and that the system is actually effective at doing what it's intended to do.
All right. We'll start with Mr. Leavitt can answer this question first, and then Judge Gall second. This is actually more of an informative question, and it kind of piggybacks off the question I asked earlier about voters being knowledgeable enough of the actual law in the court system in order to be equipped to actually vote for judges. And I'm sure you both are probably going to have similar answers to this question, but a lot of people get confused. They call me up all the time. They call Steve up. What's the difference? Can you break down what the different courts are? Because I get asked all the time, what's the difference between a justice of the peace, a district court judge, an appellate court judge, a Supreme Court judge, a federal court judge? I consistently keep being asked these questions. And like I said, I'm pretty sure both of you are going to give the same answers to this. Well, let's start with you, Mr. Leavitt. Can you explain that?
Well, I can explain it because I've appeared in every single one of these courts.
Okay.
For 30 years. Municipal court, juvenile court, justice court, district court, court of appeals, Nevada Supreme Court. I'm licensed with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm licensed with the District Court of Nevada. I'm licensed with the Supreme Court of the United States. I've practiced, and I brought my cheat sheet. I've represented clients in Washington, Utah, California, Hawaii, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Florida, in addition to my 30-year practice. So the short answer is municipal court is a court of limited jurisdiction. They handle strictly misdemeanors. Their punishments can be up to 1 year in jail or $2,000 fine. In justice court, the rules are similar, slightly different. Obviously, district courts are trial courts. They handle both civil and criminal. And I'm glad you brought that up, because when you seek an appointment, think about this. When you seek an appointment to be judge, when you decide to run for judge, you don't know whether you're going to be doing civil or criminal law. The chief judge assigns those duties every single year. I've spent 30 years, doing criminal and civil law. No disrespect to Judge Gall. I don't believe she's handled a criminal matter in her lifetime. And I think she was on this program last week and said that if she were assigned criminal duties, that she's a hard worker and that she would catch up to speed. I believe that she's a hard worker, and I believe that she would catch up to speed. This isn't a position for on-the-job training. You shouldn't be running for this, and you shouldn't be seeking an appointment if you're not qualified in criminal and civil law.
Judge Gall.
Right. I want to redirect to the question that Mr. Jonas posed. So this is another question where we could be here for a while talking about all the different courts, right? This is the civics lesson. Let me start kind of broad-based. State court versus federal court. Okay. Federal court are Article 3 courts. They're created by our Constitution. They deal with primarily federal law. And although they can hear cases dealing with state law, but they can't typically, or they don't typically hear cases just involving state law. There has to be a federal basis, or there has to be diversity between the parties, which means the parties are from two different states and there's an amount in controversy of greater than $75,000. That's how you invoke federal jurisdiction, at least on the civil side. If you go to certain areas, federal lands, and you break the law, you might be in federal court. If you break certain federal laws, such as laws that intersect interstate commerce or that go between the states, wiretapping, you may be in federal court. Okay? State court. State court, just kind of basically, it's generally about state laws. Does it mean that they can't hear cases involving federal laws? They can, right? But state court is generally where you're going to be in state laws. And then within, as you mentioned, Mr. Jonas, there's many different levels of state court. And even within those levels, there can be differences. Now, for instance, you have municipal court, you have justice court, you have district court, you have the Court of Appeals, you have Supreme Court. But like, let's take an example. Even within justice court, you have small claims court if your matter is below $10,000, right? If your matter is above $15,000, if you're in civil, or if you've been charged with a felony, you'll probably be in district court. Now, for instance, if you come before me, I give you a decision, you don't like my decision, you think I did something wrong, or I wasn't fair, you can appeal me. And that appeal, we have actually a pretty unique system. In the first instance, that appeal actually goes to our Supreme Court. We only created the Court of Appeals not too many years ago. And from the Supreme Court, it actually, certain cases get sent down to the Court of Appeals, presumptively. But then the Supreme Court may decide to keep certain cases. So we actually have a pretty unique system here in Nevada. But that's, sort of the basics. There's also family court. As you know, you did interviews for family court earlier. That's part of district court, but they have exclusive jurisdiction over family law, certain family law matters. So we have a very varied, again, no pun intended, court system. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. We really need to begin the education with our courts earlier so people understand the rights that they have and the impact our court systems have on their lives.
This is a little off the cuff question, I guess. I've interviewed a lot of different lawyers, judges, and for some reason, just hearing both of your answers, there seems to be a level of competency that for some reason I find a lot more rare, and this is a compliment to you guys, for both of you, but I find it rare in family courts. I know you're not family court judges, but what's going on with the family courts where there just seems to be less competency? I don't want to point fingers at the family law courts, but there's a clear distinction from the judges I've interviewed that are in civil and criminal courts versus the family courts. And I just wonder why that is.
I'm just going to answer and say, I hope you're wrong. I really hope you're wrong, and you might be right. That's my answer.
I don't want to argue with your perception. And as a sitting judge, I am constrained on the things I can say. But I think like everywhere, you have good lawyers, you have bad lawyers, you have good judges, you have bad judges, whether it's in family court, whether it's in district court, whether, whatever court it's in. And that's, again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but it's one of the reasons we've got to educate our electorate to make sure that, good judges, if we're going to have an election system, that good judges are put into our courts.
Have either of you run for this seat or any other seat before? And if so, have you withdrawn and gone to another seat? And why, if you have?
This is the first seat that I've run for, District Court Department 9. I did seek an appointment to another seat. I was nominated to the governor, but I was not appointed by the governor.
As I indicated before, I ran successfully for the Board of Regents in both 2004 and 2010. I served the maximum term limit amount of 12 years. In 2018, I sought a seat in Las Vegas Justice Court. I came in second to Judge Alana Lee Graham. And so this is the second time I've run for a judicial seat, fourth time I've sought public office.
For both of you, what's the driving force that would make somebody want to become a judge? What is it that makes you want to follow this direction?
Well, I think it's my turn. So, I could start with a regular paycheck, or I could say, is 30 years enough? Should I have to do another 10? I've done really everything you can do frankly, as a civil and criminal practitioner. I just turned 60. I personally believe you should have to practice at least 25 years to sit in judgment of your peers. Now, we have a rule that says 5 years for justice court, 10 for district, and 15 for the Supreme Court. But that's just how long you've been licensed. You could get married, be a stay-at-home dad for 15 years, and never have practiced one day in your life and still run for the Nevada Supreme Court. That's not right. They need to tailor that. But you look at every position in the country. If experience doesn't matter the most in judicial races, I don't have any hair because I've worried about clients for 30 years. Okay? Think about that. What do you learn? Think back to 15 years ago, how much you've progressed in your life. And my favorite quote of all time is when Ronald Reagan was running for president. He said, as long as you don't criticize my age, I'm not going to criticize your lack of experience.
That's okay. Thank you very much. So I sought this appointment, and I'm seeking to defend my seat and seeking to be retained because, really at bottom, it comes down to, I love this state and I love this community. When I came here in 2016, I didn't know what I was going to expect, what I was going to learn. And what I learned is that this state and this county is comprised of very hard working men and women, including in our bar, our legal bar. And I wanted to be able to give back and be a part of the legal bar in a way where our bench reflected the hardworking men and women of the state and the hardworking men and women of this bar. And in my view, our bench needs all kinds. You need criminal practitioners. You need civil practitioners. You need criminal practitioners who did juvenile law. You need criminal practitioners who did other types of criminal law. You need personal injury attorneys. You need defense attorneys, and you need complex civil litigators. We need all kinds on our bench because we have all kinds of cases that come before us. And so we need a diverse bench, both in terms of diversity of experience, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of professional qualifications, because it isn't one size fits all anymore. And so I wanted to be a part of that, and I wanted to make a change.
What do you mean by change?
I wanted to make a change where we were, as I said earlier, you have good judges and you have bad judges. You have hardworking judges and you have judges who don't work so hard. And I wanted to be part of the judges. I want to be in the group of people who works hard, who renders decisions on a timely basis, who provides access to my courtroom. I wanted to be a part of that change.
Didn't you withdraw a couple of times or file for a couple other seats and then you ended up with this one? And if you did, why end up with Department 9?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for that question. So what happened is the filing period for District Court 9 was June 20th. That was a result of Judge Christina Silva being elevated to the federal bench. If you had asked me in May whether I would be interviewing for a judicial position, on August 3rd with the Veterans and Politics International, I would have said, hell no. But because of the level of preparation, because of my experience running campaigns, it was very, very easy for me to make a decision. I semi-retired a couple of years ago at the height of COVID, and I relocated my office home after 27 years. It's now 28 years, of private practice. But I filed June 20th in one respect to honor my mother, whose birthday is June 20th. And fortunately, she's still with us. She's 93 years of age. And at that time, there was only one judicial opening. 2 weeks ago, Judge Villani, as we all know, retired, and he retired effective immediately, not December 31st. That created another seat. Elections are all about matchups, and every person that files for a seat should go into it with the interest of winning. And I am fortunate to be in a seat running against someone that's qualified, running against someone that's competent, and someone that's ethical, and it would have been the same if I was in Department 17.
Okay, so my next question is going to be about judicial temperament. And the specific reason why I'm in, let me preference it this way. First off, even if you are somebody, you can be a lawyer for 30 years. You can be as well versed in the law as anybody. I don't care who you are. When you enter a courtroom, it is a very scary place. It can be a very, let's rephrase. Let's say not scary, but intimidating place. Okay, so nonverbals and judicial temperament to me is something that I really truly look for in a judge. Somebody that's going to put everybody at ease, and so they understand they have a good level playing field. That's my definition of what I would like to see for judicial temperament. What I would like to do is have Mr. Leavitt, if you want to start. Is that about right of what you would do? What's your judicial temperament when you take the bench?
Yes.
If you were to take the bench.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think you have to take a step backwards. Recently, I changed my party affiliation to nonpartisan. Guess why? Judges should be nonpartisan. You shouldn't expect to walk into a courtroom and see someone that's got a leaning towards the Democrats, towards the Republicans. Equal justice. If you look at my campaign thing, justice for all. How can you dispense justice for all if you're affiliated with a political party in a nonpartisan race? That's the message I wanted to send. Equal justice, everybody equal. Nonpartisans, Republicans, Democrats, everybody's welcome into the courtroom. The rules are the same. And I'll tell you what is wrong with smiling? What is wrong with please and thank you? What is wrong with addressing each litigant? Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here today. I hope you have a meaningful experience. What's wrong with that?
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. So judicial temperament is also guided by the ethical guidelines that govern our judges. And one of the things it talks about is treating everyone, acting patiently and treating everyone with dignity. I do think that's very important. And one of the reasons is because, unless people are before me getting married, right, which is probably one of the happiest days in their lives, or perhaps when you appear in court for an adoption, that might be one of the happiest days in your lives. Most of the time when people come to court, it's not for a happy reason. Right? If you are a criminal defendant, you're looking at having your freedom taken away from you in some way. If you're a civil litigant, you're looking at, a possible judgment against you, or maybe you've had your property impinged upon. And so you're in court to get your property back. So nobody is happy once they've come to court. They're there. It is scary. They're sometimes, they're paying lawyers to be there. They're paying for the privilege to be in the courtroom. And so I think what they're doing is they're looking up to the judge to be the person who's rendering fair and honest decisions. And part of that is I don't think you can render fair and honest decisions unless you have the right judicial temperament, which means, again, you are patient, you are kind, you treat everyone with dignity, and you act in a way so that you can listen to everything that's coming before you.
So we research about each candidate that comes in here, obviously, so we can ask a questions. And I had read about you, Mr. Leavitt, that you had attempted suicide after your last election or campaign. Is that true? That's on the internet?
Yeah, I was I'm very, very surprised that I would get a question like that.
I just wondered if it is true. I just wondered how that would affect you on the bench, or if it would at all.
Yeah, so it's I'm going to be very, very polite. I find it to be an incredibly shocking question that you would raise a private medical issue of mental health. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. It was an accidental discharge of a weapon, not under the influence of any alcohol or any drugs. In the last 5 years, I've had 2 family members kill themselves, and my wife has had 2 family members kill themselves. Let me remind you of something else. In 1841, Abraham Lincoln, our most beloved president, was out in a field with a gun, considering taking his life. His friends retrieved him. They brought him to the house. Those friends stayed there for 90 days, taking turns, so that they would not leave the house. Abraham Lincoln then ran for office 6 times and lost. And in 1860, he became the most beloved president. In my state of despair and depression from the loss of family members, I wrote this 8-page document that's about to be published all over the Valley, because for 12 years, I led the effort to create the UNLV School of Medicine. Some say one of the most significant political accomplishments in the last 50 years. I did that in a state of depression. So any suggestion that Lincoln or myself, who was able to pull myself up from the bootstraps, never missed a court appearance, never had a complaint with the state bar. I survived that, and I'm better today. And I caused a lot of pain to a lot of people. But you know what? Hope is eternal. I'm back. I think you can tell that. My friends are thrilled that I'm back. My family is thrilled that I'm back. So if we want to talk about awareness and depression and mental health, this is beautiful, because maybe I don't get this question again. But if I do, I won't give an answer this short next time.
Well, I interview a lot of candidates, and I have a podcast, and I do those things. So sometimes when the voters are reading things online, I bring things up to where you can answer and give the voters an idea, because people just reading stuff on the internet, we don't know what's true, what really happened, or what, the true story is. So sometimes bringing something like that up, you can tell the voters and all the viewers out there your story and what happened, and that could help a lot of other.
Respectfully, because I like you, I'm not on a platform running to prevent suicide. Okay, I'm not one of the celebrities that took their lives this last week. So I find it very, very questionable. I accept your sincere answer. To ask someone about something from 4 years ago that is that private. We have HIPAA laws for a reason.
Why is it on the internet?
You'd have to ask any person that's put it on the internet. And just because it's on the internet doesn't give carte blanche for someone to ask about it. There's some things that are just distasteful, okay? And this is not personal, but I hope you can appreciate, after losing 4 family members, don't know if that's happened to you, and I hope to God it hasn't. Yeah. But when you care about family like I do, and you lost 4 of them, yeah, I hope you do. I hope you do. And I hope it never comes up again during this campaign. But that'll be my answer.
Vem, anything else?
Veterans Treatment Court. Have you guys had experience with that?
So Veterans Treatment Court, or Veterans Court, as it's more commonly known, is a specialty court, both within our justice court and within in our district court. And the concept of Veterans Court is that for non-violent offenders and non-sexually based offenders who are veterans, they can be put into a 12-month program with mental health counseling, other types of support and counseling as an alternative to the typical court process. And I know for me, it's not a specialty court that I'm involved in, meaning I don't preside over Veterans Court, but it's a court that I know that we are very proud of to have, to be able to recognize the sacrifices that our veterans and our serving men and women have given to this country, and to understand that they face unique challenges within our court system.
I think I'm just going to be more simple. I've had people in Veterans Court. I don't believe Judge Gall's ever appeared in Justice Court, but she is aware of it, and I think that says a lot for her preparation for the interview tonight.
So I understand that it used to be a free service for the veterans, and now that they're charged.
Oh, the rules
that,
change the rules change all
true?
the time, of course.
So who's in charge of changing that rule?
Well, Justice Court right now, Veterans Court's run by Judge Harmony Letizia. I think her father is Judge Gall's campaign manager, so maybe she has a better answer. But right now, Harmony Letizia in Justice Court presides.
So it's one person that changes those rules?
Well, no, there's staff, and they get input from others, and there's a procedure, and changes are made sometimes. They're always looking, obviously, for money. It's a very difficult issue because when you have a population, when you have homelessness, when you have opioid addiction, and I'll just close with this. My wife is the executive assistant at Vegas Stronger. Her day is dealing with homelessness and opioid addiction. Those folks don't have money, even $5. They shouldn't be charged anything.
So it should be a free service then.
If you can't afford it, it should absolutely be free, including transportation to and there.
So access to justice, money is always a big factor in that, however way we look at it. In my opinion, I want you guys to dissect what I'm about to say, is that I think these organizations, whether it's the bar or the IRS, benefit from complicating things in order for there to be more financial incentives with these trials. Whereas in a perfect world, a pro se litigant would be able to walk in a court, make their case, and literally not hinge the destruction of somebody's life based upon the fact whether they're a millionaire or not. That's a perfect judicial system. Simply comment about what I just said, and whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, look, there's no perfect answer. I think Judge Gall would agree with that. Obviously, we have the Sixth Amendment and we have guaranteed rights of counsel. That's well and good if you're an indigent defendant. But if you're indigent and you're being sued civilly and you're up against some high-powered lawyers, you are at a tremendous disadvantage. And we are not willing as a society to pay legal fees for those people that are civilly indigent. I think that's something we should look at. Some people would consider that a radical concept, but I got to tell you, that's part of justice for all. Just because you're in civil court instead of criminal court, you should have less rights? I don't think so. But it's a very, very expensive proposition if we go that way. I personally, as a taxpayer, would be willing to pay a little bit more if we had a fund that would go to solve that problem. It's my personal opinion.
So is the fact that we have so many statutes that are layers and layers and layers. And you have literal statutes that are contradicting the Constitution, and some would say repugnant to the Constitution. Is that a part of the problem?
Well, look, we can't have everyone understand the law or we'd be out of business, right? So that's my light answer. But look, it's complicated. I remember the first day of law school, the professor came in, they had a cart of books. There were about 30 large textbooks. He pointed out that there would be more laws passed and created by the end of our day, that day, than what we were going to study in law school. So you have to have highly trained lawyers. It's a necessary evil. I'm the proud son of a physician who did a residency, went to Mayo Clinic, went to LA. He was 35 before he earned a paycheck. He was in school for almost 18 years, and he was first in his medical class. That wasn't me, but I wasn't last. But think about that. You have to be really well trained to be in a profession. And it's no different whether it's, with the Board of Realtors. You have to be a professional. There's an examination, and it should be rigorous.
So, Mr. Miller, thank you for your question. I touched upon it a little bit earlier when I was talking about even with legal aid, even when there are organizations that provide representation, whether you're on the plaintiff's side or the defense side for civil litigants, they can't serve everyone. They can't even serve everyone within their income constraints. And then you talk about other people who are slightly above or even significantly above but still can't afford a lawyer. It's a problem. And it's a problem where there's certainly not a perfect solution. I'm not even sure what the solution is to, address it, to significantly address it. And I'm sorry that I don't have the answer. I wish I did. I think part of it is making things a little bit more accessible for litigants, especially civil litigants where they don't have the right to counsel. And one thing people should know, this is part of education, is there is a civil self-help law center in our courts. A lot of people don't know that. You can go to the civil self-help law center and there will be forms and there will be instructions for certain types of cases. And people should take advantage of that. And I think we need to advertise that a little bit more so people understand that that service is available to them.
Okay, we don't have any more questions for you. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and give each of you your 1.5-minute conclusion. I'll start with you, Mr. Leavitt. If you want to look directly into the camera and just give your final why the voters should vote for you, and also please make sure you give out your contact information.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I hope that voters watch every single minute of this. I hope it plays. I hope it replays. I expect during this campaign to replay several of the clips from tonight. And that's me even being vigorous and polite with Ms. Phillips. Maybe she handed me the election tonight because I don't know of a family that hasn't been touched by suicide. I wanted this race to be about merits. I want this race to be about what I've done for 30 years. I love Judge Gall. She's been here 6 years. That's not her fault. I've been here for 30 years practicing. I have hundreds and thousands of clients and followers. I served 20 hours a week for no pay for the Board of Regents. With the help of a lot of other people talk about community service. Kind of tough to argue with the UNLV School of Medicine. That was my contribution to Nevada, was creating a school of medicine in Las Vegas. We've created thousands of jobs, and we've increased medical care. Nothing I will do as a judge will ever be as important as what I did on the board. And I would have run again, but the voters, in their wisdom, said 12 years is enough in state office, and they were probably right. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Veterans in Politics for having me tonight. I'm proud to be your judge in District Court Department 9. I went through a rigorous vetting process by our Judicial Selection Commission, which is comprised of not only the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court and practitioners in our community, it is comprised of everyday people within our community. And they found me qualified to nominate me to the governor, and then I was appointed. I'm defending my seat because I want to remain your judge. Why? Because I love this community. And I want to see our bench reflect the hardworking people of this community. When I came to Las Vegas, I didn't know what to expect. But what I found out was that this state and Clark County is comprised of people who moved here just like me. You didn't have to have a name from 10 generations ago or 5 generations ago. You could be anybody. You could be a hospitality worker. You could be a professional. You could be a laborer, and you could achieve the dream that all of us wants, which is we want a good life for ourselves and we want a better life for our children. And I want to continue being your judge on the bench so that I can help make sure that the right decisions are made and they're made with fairness and integrity. You can visit my campaign website, www.mariagall.com at any time. And if you ever want to visit my courtroom, please feel free. I'm in Chambers 5A in the Regional Justice Center, 200 Lewis Avenue in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both very much for coming on and answering our questions. And with that will conclude our endorsement interview for District Court Judge Department 9. Thank you.